Kia ora, back on track here. Video number 2. This is a very brief video just to look at our very first example of a TK-Enter program. It's not going to do much, but it'll be at least an intro to the idea. So, first GUI program, I'm just going to develop it on the fly. I said we're using TK-Enter, so we start with from TK-Enter import star. Now this is generally sort of bad form, and I'm sort of reluctant to do it this way, but I can't think of a better way, and I'll maybe explain later why this is. I'm going to import all of the TK-Enter classes, methods, constants, etc. into my current global namespace. The reason I'm doing it is because I want to also import a whole heap of stuff from what's called the themed toolkit, TTK, and the names conflict. So by doing it this way, I manage to dump all the newer names, the improved names, over the top of the old ones, and I don't have to know exactly which package each of my objects, widgets, etc. came from. So we'll just run with this. Let's spend any more time on that. So I've imported all the stuff I need. Now I'm going to write my first program. It always starts with a main. I'm going to define my main function, and I have to create a window which I call the TK constructor with no parameters at all to create it. I've now got what we call the root window. This is the window. I'm going to put a widget in it. And the widget is going to be a label widget, which is just a hunk of text, fixed text, which is displayed on the screen. And to do that, we call the constructor for it. That's from the TK-Enter package. It's just been imported. Label, and the first parameter to a widget is always the window, or the well, later on we'll see it's the parent that I'm going to put it in. For now it's the window, and I want to put something in it. So I'm going to put something in it by explicitly specifying the text for it. Remember I said in Python, when you call a function, you can explicitly pass in certain parameters by name. We have to use that convention in TK-Enter because there's a lot of different names, and so we don't use positional parameters except for the window. We use named parameters. So the text is, this is our label. I've created a widget. I've created a window and I put a widget in it, and now I have to say where do I want the widget to go in the window, and so I have to position it, and we do that using a special geometry manager called the grid, or it's actually a layout manager called the grid. So we call the grid method of our widget to position it at row equals 0 and column equals 0. This is a case where you rather wish positional parameters could be used, but they can't. I said there were a few rough edges to TK-Enter. This is one of them. Almost done, but because this is a GUI program, it has to now wait for the user to do something, because that's what GUI programs do. They are stuck in something we call the GUI loop, the main loop. And oddly enough, the main loop is actually a method of the window, the top level window in our GUI program. And that's it, main. So there it is. Let's see what happens. I'm going to save that. I've called it firstlook.py. I'm going to save that, and now I'm going to click the run button, and let's see what happens. Bingo, what happened? Well, a bit hard to see anything. Up here it appeared. Wasn't very obvious, was it? But there's a window. It's a standard window. I can actually do things to it. I can make it bigger, so it clearly is a window, and I can drag it around now that I made a bit of room for it. So there's my window, and it's very exciting. It's got "this is our label" in it. It's a typical Windows window. It's got a little icon. It's got I can minimize it. Then I can come down here and fish it out again. Well, I can try to fish it out again. Where did it go? Oh, it's down here. Sorry, wrong one. And I can, of course, close it. If I close it, well, I can maximize it. Bingo! Woohoo! That's certainly big enough. This is our label, and of course I can close it. If I close it, program's over. That's it. I've just made my first GUI program. So key ideas: this created the widget. This positioned it in an imaginary grid at row 0, column 0, top left corner. You might think, well, let's change this to row 10 and column 100, and let's see what happens. And it's sort of uninteresting, really, because exactly the same thing happened as before. There's no change. It's in the top left corner. You may think, well, how can that happen? And we'll come to that in video after next, actually. I've got a lot of little videos. The reason, just to look ahead, is because there are 9 empty rows in there. There's nothing in them, so they collapse down to 0 size, and there's 99 empty columns, and they collapse down to 0 size. So it only makes sense to put things in a row 10 if there are things in the other 9 rows in front of it. So I've covered all that slide. We've covered the idea that the GUI thing runs in an endless loop. I can sort of demonstrate that by saying print about to enter main loop. And then when we're done with the main loop, I can say main loop finished. And if I do that and run this program again, notice on the output it says about to enter main loop. Over here we have our poor lost little forlorn GUI window, which I'm going to make bigger. And at the moment, we're stuck in this main loop. The instant I click that, it says main loop finished, and the program exits. Now that's just one widget. There's a whole heap of widgets. Here's some of the important ones that are present in TK. This is not meant to be a very extensive course in TK. We're just doing it in 1 week. So we're only going to deal with the few that you're seeing here in blue. There's menus and menu buttons and messages and sliders and scroll bars. We don't have time for all that. Only the key principles are going to come into this 1 week of course. So there is one other. I'll just give you a demonstration. Let's put a button in. So I'll go back to row 0, column 0, because those were silly values, and I'm going to put a button in here. And I'm going to grid the button in. Sorry, I'm going to create it first of all. Button is a capital B button in the window, and I'll give it some text, which is going to be equal click to a bit of text saying click me. And I'm going to grid the button in at row 1 and column 0. So you can sort of imagine that's just underneath the label that I added. So let's see if that worked. Here it is. Our window's up here. Let's make it a bit bigger. It's got a label and a button. Now you can see the layout's pretty terrible. We'll have to talk about that yet. Notice the button does buttony things, and it lets me click it. It doesn't do anything, but hey, you can click it. It's a button. And there's these other ones like entries and frames and combo box, and we'll get onto those in due course. The only other thing I wanted to do in this video is talk a little bit about widget options. So here I showed you setting up a widget option using a parameter into the constructor. There are other ways. One of the other ways I can do it is I can actually use it as though it were like a dictionary assignment. So I can go label text equals, this is our label. So that's another way of plugging in an attribute, if you like. Whoops, forgot the L. I can plug in this attribute either through the parameter list by giving it a name there, and I seem to have lost my opening quote. Or I can, and there's yet another way, there's a generic configure method on any widget, and I'm going to use that one here to create my text for my button. So I'm going to go button.configure, and I'm going to pass in that same parameter text as click me. So there's 3 ways you've seen. Pass it in to configure the options for a widget. There's also ways of setting the style for widgets, and there's quite a lot of attributes that all widgets have, such as the height and the padding, what style they're going to be drawn in, text, width, height, and so on. We'll introduce those in due course. Just to run this modified version of the program, there it is now, and it looks exactly as before, no change, because all I did was set the text in 2 different ways from before. And that's what that slide's about, and we'll talk about attributes like padding and width, etc. That's all I had for this video, nice short one. The next video we'll look more at the geometry manager and how you can control layout so that the widgets look a lot better than that. All this one was about was a first taste of TK Enter. Bye for now, for this